Welcome back to the Fantasy Rugby Draft podcast. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson, and joining me in the booth once again is the man primarily made of moss, Nathan Mossman. How are you, sir?
We've probably said it before, but I just want to give people a reminder about trades going through before game week lock without you realising and what that can mean. I'll give you an example.
Did you have an incident?
There was an incident. Yeah, an incident occurred. I put a trade in at the end of last week to get Ardie Savea, and I was giving up Israel Folau. And I sort of slipped that through, Friday afternoon, so late on Friday afternoon. Sort of left it, kind of forgot about it, kind of went and had a few beers. And it wasn't until I got home later on that I looked at my team and noticed I had an Israel Folau shaped hole in my outside backs.
That's a big hole.
Yeah, and some guy called Ardie Savea on my bench.
Yeah, there's a trap for newcomers.
Yeah. Fortunately, it actually didn't cost me, but it is something to keep in mind. I mean, I completely forgot that I'd done it, and then I would have been fairly disappointed if that had been a significant thing.
It's especially true when you've put out a trade a while ago, and you've just completely forgotten about that you've offered that trade. Now, I'm pretty good. I cancel most of my trades just about 6:30 on a Friday night that I've got any outs hanging. But sometimes you'll see a trade go through. I certainly in the first couple of seasons, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I did offer that. And now I've got a big hole in my team. We're recording this on Monday, May the 2nd. We're going to review Game Week 10 of Super Rugby for Fantasy Rugby Draft. If we have time, we'll cross across to the free agent desk and review some players for you to consider on your waiver wire. And finally, we'll check some top scores, managers and leagues for Game Week 10. I know you've got we're a little bit time sensitive here, so we're going to fly through as many games as we can while we have the man made of moss before he has to duck off for his spray tan. But who do you think the bookie's favourite for the title is now, Mossman, after those rounds of games, or this week's rounds of games?
Well, I haven't looked at this. I think coming into the season, I believe that the Chiefs and Crusaders might have been equal, and the Hurricanes are up there. So I think it'll still be one of those three. Possibly, obviously the team to take the most away out of the weekend was the Hurricanes. So if there's been any change in the bookies' thinking, it's probably likely to be them. But yeah, I've got a funny feeling that maybe they might fancy the Crusaders as well.
Yeah, so that's why I bring it up, because of the Hurricanes' performance, and I was curious to see how much that had affected the odds around the world. Now, I went to Paddy Power and sourced this because I didn't want any local bias, if you will. And the Chiefs are favourite, $2.50. And then the Crusaders at $3.50. The Brumbies are at $5.50. But the Hurricanes and Highlanders are $8.50. The Hurricanes in particular. That's big money.
That's good money.
That's really good money. Let's have a look at Game Week 10. Then we put out our Match of the Day poll. And this is, I think, getting more and more into which game pissed you off because you had the most fantasy players that disappointed you in poll. So who do you think won that? The options were Reds Cheetahs, Highlanders Brumbies, or Chiefs Sharks.
I would have thought it would be Highlanders Brumbies.
I thought that too. That was second place. It was actually the Chiefs Sharks, 41% of the votes, and Reds Cheetahs was 27%. I actually voted for Reds Cheetahs because I found that a bit disjointed, wasn't very free flowing. They talked about the humidity in Brisbane catches a few people out in the dead of game. But which way did you vote?
I would have gone Highlanders Brumbies if it was just. Obviously the conditions played a part. Yeah, but. Kind of a bizarre game in terms of the stats.
Yeah, I didn't go Highlanders Brumbies just mainly because I liked seeing all of the swan dries in the crowd. New Zealand listeners will know what we're referring to.
Yeah, I enjoyed the cans of Spates on display as well.
Proudly.
There's no plastic bottles going on there.
No, there's not. Right, let's play on to Force Balls. And Sir Fontaines your first overall pick next year?
Of course.
Every
week.
Every week, absolutely. For us, I guess from fantasy perspective, Ian Pryor, how did he go?
So I didn't actually have the privilege of seeing this game. What did I miss?
It's quite the privilege. You missed Sean Maloney in all his gloriousness and his commentating. He's getting to be very amusing. Him and Scotty Stevenson doing some good work. Ian Pryor, we talked about him previously playing out of position, how he's a halfback in the game, but he played at fly half, so he did okay. I mean, we said you only really need to get a conversion and a penalty, and you're already in the top half of the halfbacks for the week. And he did that. He got 2 penalties and he got 2 conversions, and he was the 6th halfback overall this week. So I think those that drafted him in will be happy enough. I don't know the long-term ramifications of it, but I think you might as well hold on to now until we at least see a Force game, especially with them coming up with the Sunwolves. But it probably wasn't too much about the Force, but more about the Bulls. They were very, very impressive. We've highlighted before, once they get most of their names back, there'll be quite a significant force and could go deep into the Super Rugby comp. But Arno Botha, this is the guy that we kind of thought when he first came out and before all of the knee injuries. He was really, really good. He carried the ball very, very strongly and was impressive all day. SP Murray, again, did some good work in the counter and jinking around. Doesn't have the top end speed that a lot of other players, or say like a Haaland, but it was pretty good. But I think this is more a byproduct of playing the Force as opposed to the Bulls being very, very good. But let's just say they were pretty clinical and took their chances. Blues Rebels, what did you make of Reece Hodge's first try? We'd been questioning how much of an input he had into his tries the previous week. What did you think of his first one?
Look, this was all Reece Hodge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Good players, they just create things around them.
It's how the fantasy gods work, though, right?
Of course.
Yeah, he's a bit of an interesting player, Reece Hodge. I haven't read too many articles this week to see what his performance was, but he got bottled up a little bit more with George Moala. He's a very similar player to, say, a Sterling Mortlock. He reminds me a lot of him. Whereas he gets the ball, he puts it under his arm, and he just puts his head down and charges. There's not a hell of a lot of guile to him. And it was a terrible missed tackle on Vicinere at one point for Vicinere's try, but you could level that at about 6 or 7 Rebels for Vicinere's try.
Yeah, but we must be the only people outside of Australia that don't think he's anything special.
Not on the evidence we've seen, right? So maybe they're seeing something, they've seen something at age grade level that we haven't seen, that they know is there. But on the evidence that we've seen at Super Rugby level, I wouldn't be jumping screaming it from the rooftop, shall we say. Naivalu, what do you make of this? Are you worried, or are you happy to take the intercept? That's all he needs. Walk away and take it.
I'll take it. Yeah, I mean, I think he's probably still finding his feet a little bit, but this is what he's capable of. And not everybody can do what he did. That's a 95-metre run.
No, that's right. He skipped 2 tackles as well that he was half broken into, so it was quite good.
Look, he's going to have games where he'll combine something like that with more, I guess, orthodox ways of scoring, and that's what makes him so dangerous. Yeah,
that's right. He only needs one chance. I thought Vicinere was pretty good. What did you make of them?
Yeah. No, I think Vicinere was sort of back to kind of what we expect from him. Especially as a runner. He's a big guy and he's hard to bring down.
He is. Speaking of big guys that are hard to bring down, George Moala, I thought, had a really good game. Didn't necessarily translate too much in Fantasy Rugby Draft, but I thought he kind of straightened that back line and kept their defence honest all day and was always probing.
No, I think better days ahead for Moala as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this is a bit of a leading question because we're discussing Blues Rebels, but if I had to ask you which team in the competition had the highest possession in terms of minutes per match, who do you think it might be?
No, I don't know. You tell me.
It's the Blues, which I was astounded by. I thought it might be someone like the Lions or someone like the Highlanders.
I thought this was going to be a trick question and the answer was actually the Rebels.
No, it's the Blues.
Wow.
Yeah, I was astounded by this too. Opta Jason gives us that stat. Really, really impressive. Tuipulotu, that was his first match back for a wee bit. I thought he looked pretty good and is someone to look out for, certainly next week when they play the Kings. And this isn't necessarily for fantasy rugby, but I don't understand why the Rebels didn't make Sean McMahon their captain. Can you understand why they didn't do it? He's everywhere. He's just awesome. He's got an amazing motor, very Adi Savia-like. He just keeps on going, and players look at him. Players don't look to Nick Surzacker, who's throwing passes out of the in goal. It's Sean McMahon. Any idea why that might be?
Oh, of course, but can't tell you.
Fair enough.
As you well know, I have massive inside knowledge from the man at the Rebels. That's
true. The man at the Rebels has made some interesting calls for captaincy. Anything more from this particular match? Oh, Ehire West got the kicks taken off him. Pierce Francis made it.
That's right, but he was actually subbed just... It's touch and go whether he was actually... He might have been on the field for one of those.
Yep.
But he was subbed early, and if you actually looked in the papers today, Umaga was saying, I made a mistake there, because they were leading... they were up by quite a lot.
Yeah.
And then they hooked Hall and West, and then almost threw it away. And Umaga sort of was out in the papers putting his hand up saying, yeah, that was a mistake. Shouldn't have subbed those guys so early. Thought we had it in the bag, this kind of thing. So, not worried about West.
TJ with the classic commentators, the Blues having their chances literally slipping through their fingers. Strong. Highlanders Brumbies. We touched on it on Thursday, in the pod, that this isn't at Forsyth Bar. And this is what happens when you're not playing it at Forsyth Bar at that type of, in that far south of New Zealand. The rain put paid to a lot of performances here. I guess the shining lights probably, Kubeli, I thought, played quite well, and Lima Sopoaga, kicking superbly.
Mm. You almost wonder if this kind of game perhaps suited Kubeli more, which is kind of odd.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you looked at the rucks and mauls stats, I think there was 40,000 to 1 at one point in favour of the Brumbies. And it was like that the Highlanders just didn't particularly want to have the ball. They said, look, you can play in this weather as much as you like, but we know you're eventually going to make mistakes. And it kind of came through, and Sopoaga was good at 5-6 at one point. May even turned out to be 6 or 7, but that's what I want my All Black first 5 to be doing.
Mm. And maybe Kubeli didn't fancy his players outside him to actually hold on to the ball, so figured he might as well have a go himself.
There is a little bit of that, absolutely. What did you make of Jack Wilson's yellow card?
Probably seemed a bit harsh, I think.
Yeah, it was a little bit harsh. I think they're being really protective nowadays, and it hit the shoulder first and slid up and hit the head is a thing of the past. If it hits they're saying if it's above the shoulder line now. They're using that phrase, shoulder line. So, and a little bit of a side note, the American pro rugby jerseys have a red line on the actual jerseys now to tell the ref where the tackle needs to be below. Progressive thinking from those Americans.
Are you serious?
I am serious.
Okay.
Aidan Toa, again at his electric best.
This is the Aidan Toa that we've come to love.
Yeah, there's some pretty high profile glaring errors, and he got the hook as well at one point. Kuchitown brought up an interesting point, is that Nisbo keeps on getting Christian Lealiafano mixed up with Aidan Toa. And I wonder if maybe Bernie has been doing that as well as a head coach, and that's why Toa is still playing. Just an interesting theory. If you've been keeping up with the saga at the Brumbies, Michael Jones is no longer. He, before the weekend, had raised a workplace grievance against Stephen Moore and Scott Fardy, I believe, was the other one. Now, the details of that wasn't made privy. I'm almost wondering now whether it's a Mourinho type situation where he wanted to get fired so he could get a payout that was in his clause, because I think that's why he brought that workplace grievance, and then 3 days later, finally, sure enough, they wrote it, he got it in writing that he's been let go. Apparently, Joe Roth in line to be CEO there, so that's good news. Anything more from a fantasy perspective, though, from Brumbies Highlanders?
Well, it's good news for Joe Roth. I don't know about anybody else. Who knows? What's his background?
Didn't he get an honorary doctorate from one of Oxford, Cambridge? That means a lot, right?
Of course, yeah. Yeah, it's the kind of thing that, you give to, I'm sure Kim Kardashian's probably got one of those. Maybe she should be CEO of the Brumbies. Probably do a good job.
Absolutely. Doctor. All right, move on to Red's Cheetahs then. we've been chatting about to a number of folks who are getting a little bit worried about Nick Frisby and what to do with him, but coming back to Brisbane appears to have cured a lot of ills. That was a really good performance from him. A very Nick Frisby-like performance, just following on the right channels and backing up where he needed to be. And he took that dummy quite well. He wasn't really a dummy, he just put the ball under his arm and scored for his second try. Samu Karevi, crazy good.
Yeah, out for 4 weeks.
That's right. Wasn't as bad as I thought.
No. I mean, if you're someone who owns him, like I do, you're looking at it and you're thinking, well, 4 weeks, that takes me through the playoffs. You're holding, definitely. You
are holding. And he might be someone to try and prize free of someone who is scrambling to make the playoffs as well. You can see on the sideline he was pretty gutted. He obviously had the Australia Test matches in line. Listen to the Green and Gold rugby podcast. They're still of the opinion that Kieran Durrani should be that 13. I think we've discussed this, right? You park your car in the same garage as me, Karevi?
Yeah, it's once again, it's one of those things that I look at it purely from a fantasy rugby point of view, and I see what he does, and I think that's great. Does that mean he fits with the Australian, the Wallaby game plan? I've got no idea. Yeah, I hope he doesn't, and I hope they pick him.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a bad thing. So, no, honestly, I have no idea. I'm not inclined to sort of analyse what's best for the Australian international team. It's really out of my pay rate.
You're out of your jurisdiction, stay in your lane?
That's right, yeah. No, once you cross that county line, I'm sheriff over here. I know it's a whole different thing. Yeah, that'd be calling the feds then.
Players in this match that everyone didn't particularly go well outside of Frisby and Karevi. I think McIntyre got 15 odd points. We've always said that Fred Zalinga's got some value if he starts, but it's really difficult to roster him when you're not too sure if it's going to be Neil Moraes one week and then him the other. All right, anything more from this game?
Cheetah's front row. I looked at the score and I assumed there must have been a red card because that's how bad their score was. It turns out there wasn't a red or a yellow. I think they made 8 metres. Were penalised 5 times and maybe turned it over 4 or 5 times as well. Missed a few tackles. So yeah, great all-round performance by those guys.
Yeah, that's not ideal because the Cheetahs had actually been one of those kind of plug-and-play type front rows as well with Torsten van Varsel. Was it Torsten van Varsel? One of those, Torsten. Yeah. In the front row, he was always quite good in terms of getting metres and being that last person on the ruck and maul.
No, they just had a mare, I think.
Okay. I thought Tui had a couple of big strong busts again. We hadn't seen that in the last couple of games, so it didn't really translate to a hell of a lot of points. I think he got something like 11 or 12 points, but good performance for him nonetheless. Just a reminder. Okay, Lions, Hurricanes. We've seen a lot of really good performances this season, and I put this right up with the Brumbies turning over the Hurricanes, the Chiefs turning over the Brumbies, the Crusaders turning over the Brumbies. This might be one of my most impressive matches away from home, I reckon.
It makes you wonder, though, if so many of those performances were turning over the Brumbies.
Yeah, I was catching myself.
How much of an achievement is turning over the Brumbies these days? Apparently everyone's doing it. So
it is in vogue.
I didn't see this game, so I'm actually intrigued to see, well, to hear really what it was that was behind this. Was this
rucks
poor
at the rucks? Yep.
Yeah.
Every ruck, they were just immense. They Fitzy likes to say, they just poured big numbers into the ruck. That's the key to winning a game, just pouring big numbers in the ruck time. But to be fair, that's what they were doing. Severe was really, really strong, but players like Fafita, and I'm starting to wonder now if the reason Proctor and Arso are playing, and this might be a bit harsh on them, but one of the more deciding factors, and you probably touched on it previously when you said Hala Holo is a little bit of a luxury, is that Proctor and Arso at that breakdown, they were such a menace. They were really, really good. And that first 5 minutes, the Lions just did not know what hit them. At one point, Stransky made a comment that they were panicking, and they were. When they got the ball back, they didn't know what to do with it because it was just it's like a full court press every single time. It was quite a thing to behold. I hadn't seen a start like that I think they must have been, maybe Karebi and Hunt left something in the dressing room last time. I'm not sure, but goodness gracious. From a fantasy perspective, Corey Jane, you're going to see his points, got an intercept, and probably one of the easiest tries you'll see, and one that I think Johan Ackerman is going to be playing over on the training room paddock over and over again. That was, I don't think he even was touched. It was one of the more softer tries you'll see. I mean, the Hurricanes front row, they were immense. I think the highlight reel is going to go to Reg Goodes. Have you at least seen that highlight yet?
I haven't. No, what happened?
So it was a short line. Well, it was a line out, went at the front, and Reg Goodes made a bit of a break down the sideline. And poor old Courtnall Skosan was the one person between him and the try line. And he got to the try line pretty easy. And then poor old Courtnall is still seeing stars at the moment. But there's another one where, if you'd known that, I mean, if you'd thought about it, obviously Reg Goodes going back to South Africa was always going to be a dynamite play, but I guess you start in the Hurricanes and there's nothing more you can do about it. But really, really good from Dane Coles again. Just, he runs like a centre, offloads like a centre. It's beautiful to watch at times. But yeah, I think the Lions will be disturbed by this, by the shock capacity that they had, as opposed to one of those ones where you just say, look, we weren't at the races today, move on. They're a good team. Do you remember when, was it in the playoffs? It might have been Seattle, Minnesota, this year, where Cordarrelle Patterson returned a punt when they were down 38-0 or something, and he high-stepped into the end zone and flipped the ball.
Went down 38-0.
Went down 38-0. So Lionel Mapoe scored a try, and the Lions weren't in it at that point, and the bench just went absolutely crazy, like they'd just won Lotto. It was certainly an interesting perspective, I thought.
Or maybe they had won something. Might have been a couple of bets put on beforehand.
I didn't actually see if they had a scratch card or the huddled round one, maybe. Is Ruan Kumbrink left-footed or right-footed? He's right-footed, right?
Well, he's a right winger, isn't he?
He did a left-foot kick at one point, and it went 55 metres. Now, I know we're talking a little bit about, altitude and everything like that, but yeah, it's really, really good. I just hadn't seen that before. Not really interesting for fantasy, but hadn't seen it before. Barrett, good. Again, a little bit disturbed that TJ didn't really get into the point scoring from a fantasy perspective, but look, this was just a really all-round good, solid rugby match as opposed to necessarily too much on fantasy. Proctor did go off injured, though, and that was around about the 50-minute mark. So just, the irony, right, that he plays his best game and then he gets injured. And so just something to be aware of for next week when I think the Hurricanes are playing the Sharks, right? From Lions, Malcolm Marks didn't quite make it. Creel, very, very good. Tried hard all game. You could see that he was battling a little bit there, but he was one guy that didn't give up. And the Warthog, again, yep, he was around the paddock and very difficult to tackle first up. So, again, don't be too worried with your Lions players. There'll be better things to come. Right, Stormers Waratahs. I guess we should probably talk about Leo Zass and the red card first. Have you caught a glimpse of this yet?
I haven't seen anything, actually. No, just read about it.
Well, get your cup of tea ready because I'll run you through it. So, Zass got red carded for taking out Bernard Foley in the air. And I don't have too much of a problem with it being a red card. I think he can feel a little bit unlucky that he slipped when he was when he tried to jump. His planting foot slipped, but that's no longer in the rules. The fact that he slipped or didn't, or if there was any intent, is not part of the rules anymore. So the way that the refs are refereeing it is there's two questions. Is it a fair contest? And if the ref deems it to be a fair contest, then play on. If he deems it not to be a fair contest, then one of two punitive actions happens. It's either a yellow card if he lands on his back or his hip, or it's a red card if he lands on his head and his neck. And in this case, Foley landed pretty badly on his neck and his head, so the ref had no option but to give it a red card. Now, as I say, I don't mind that too much. As I say, I think you can feel a little bit unlucky. I'm almost glad in a way in this particular area that they've taken away the intent, because it's very difficult, and players have got very clever at, keeping your eyes on the ball, making it look like they're actually attacking the ball, but they're not. And there's not really a fair contest. So they've taken intent out of the equation, which is a little bit different to the Andy Ellis throwing a punt. That should still be clear. This is a little bit more subjective. So they've made it that two-step process. The problem I have is that there was another one in the Kings Jags match, and that was Vilindlu, and he did the exact same thing. However, the guy landed on his back. Now, I can't actually remember who. I think it might have been Boffelli, landed on his back. So he only got a yellow card. It just seems a bit silly to me. It should be one or the other. It should be red or it should be yellow, not based on actually how the outcome of said penalty. So one of the questions it does raise is that, are they suggesting that, so the differences between New Zealanders taking high kicks and, say, Willie le Roux, and TJ brought this up the other day on Rugby Nation, is that Willie le Roux brings his knees quite up to his chest, loses his centre of balance, so it's a lot easier to be tipped over, whereas a New Zealand jumper will always keep his planted foot below and bring one knee up so he can maintain a little bit of that balance. What they're effectively saying is that if you actually land on your head and your neck, if you can somehow engineer that you land like that, you're going to get the other guy to get a red card versus a yellow card. Just seems a little bit dangerous precedent that they're trying to get through, and that's the only inconsistency I have. Long way about saying the red card is the right decision, but I'm just not too sure that should be the rule about the way that people land. I think it's a red card, full stop. And he was in a lot of teams, I might add, so he let a lot of folks down. But from a fantasy perspective, Jean-Luc and Bernard Foley, actually, they started really poorly. Three really bad kicks at goal. But then they kind of came around and they both played really quite well, to be honest. There was a little bit of inexperience with Jean-Luc at the end where they didn't have Zas on the field, so you need to sacrifice a few metres kicking for the sideline, because you can't afford for Folau and Reece Robinson and those guys to be throwing the ball in quickly. You need to get it to be touching someone in the crowd or deep into the crowd so that it doesn't get a quick line out. Folau was really good in this match. He ran a real quality line between Delende and Jean-Luc at one point. I think the Australian media jumped on that it was a Damien Delende miss, but that's a bit harsh. It was more of a byproduct of Jean-Luc not drifting across. I'm not entirely sure how the Waratahs won at the end with the scrum. I'm not sure where that came from, the depths of somewhere. I guess especially against that Stormers scrum, they just had a complete breakdown. I'm not entirely sure why that happens on 80 minutes, but it did. And Hooper, who aptly played very, very well, scored the try. The best player on the field, though, was Peter Steph Toy. Goodness gracious. He was a man amongst boys. He carried, and he scored a couple, I think 2 tries he scored. But it wasn't the bust or the stuff that you see. It was the cover tackle that he did on Carraro in the corner was quite out of this world, and he was just everywhere on the paddock. And this is kind of what we hoped we would see, and he's just had a really rough run of injuries. I think he's owned in most of your leagues, but if people are thinking of, they're holding Eden Etzebeth and he is on your waiver wire, then certainly snap him up. Car Notche, I'm starting to lean a bit more towards Car now. He just seems to be involved a little bit more in that carrying capacity. The Stormers use Notche a lot wider like they use Reed, but invariably it doesn't get out that far. So I think I might lean towards Carr now if I'm owning both of those. And one player who we've been suggesting to folks who it's deep down on the halfback list, but it's looking at the Stormers fixtures, is Nick Groom. Now obviously you have to be really struggling around to kind of to roster him, but the Stormers do have a very, very good run in, and he played well again this time. All right, is there any other players that I've missed there, you think, Mossman?
No, well, if you're finished on your soapbox, you might want to come down and I'll ask a couple of questions. The first one is, is purely selfish. The second one I think probably affects quite a lot of people. But the first one is, so Folau and my concern for him and recent trade of him. Just what did you make of it overall? What did you think of his usage? Is there any difference that you're noticing between him at centre versus fullback?
Not really, no, because in set pieces he plays a lot at centre. But you'll see him pop up all the show. He fielded a number of kicks from fullback or out in the wing where they were swapping around. So he is in a lot of... he gets his hands on the ball in a lot of situations anyway. It's the cheap run-back meters consistently that you get, but then that has to be coupled with this type of running line that you get from centre. You know, it was very similar to Tamanavalu's try. Just a short ball on a great angle, and Derek Carpenter a couple of weekends ago, if you can remember that one as well. He picked a great line and he ran it well. You'll get that more at centre than you will at fullback, certainly with the way that they're set up at the moment. But the downside is you get a little bit of a knock off from the return meters. Who was it you traded for again?
Artie.
Yeah, I think you're still okay with Artie. I think I'd probably still go that way. But I'm not too concerned with what I've seen so far with Folau. So how many points did he pick up?
I think it was like 18 or something maybe.
Yeah, so 18. Not bad. Away from home against the Stormers, I think I'll be pretty happy with that. You did have a question that wasn't selfish?
That's right. Zas with the red card. So we saw Emery get 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're expecting at least 1 or 2 here, right?
Yeah, he might be the same, to be honest. I don't know how much the citing commissioner takes into the fact that his planting foot did slip, but yeah, he might be the same. If Nadolo got 4 for a tip, they've been pretty harsh. I wouldn't surprise me if he's there.
And when would we expect to hear about this?
Yeah, we should know. Should know tonight. I think when South Africa wakes up, he'll have his hearing. They actioned pretty quickly last week on Emery and Nadolo. All right, let's move on to Jaguares and the Kings. How many Jags players do you think are on the front page of the Player Hub this game week? And can you name them?
Well, I know that Sanchez will be there. I know that Senatore would be there, just from seeing the scoring.
So you've got 1 and 2?
Yeah. I mean, I could throw some other names out there, but that'd just be throwing darts, really. So how about we just end the suspense and you tell me?
Quite the suspense it was, too.
It was.
Boffelli is number 3 scorer for the week. So the team wasn't named on Thursday night, but he's listed as a midfield. He was playing fullback against the Kings. That was juicy written all over it, and he got juicy to the tune of 37.4 points. And the Jaguares front row, obviously in there. Lindajo in there as well. We were a little bit wondering whether A, he would start, or if it was resting or injured, and then B, how well he'd go. So I think there's your answer, certainly against the Kings. And then there's John Martin Hernandez. There's a lock, and then there's Montero as well. So let's just say that the Kings didn't put in a great performance, and a lot of players that started your Jaguares players have been rewarded. Now, I think a lot of people are going to point to playing the Kings, but this is only the first time that they've had it's not the first time. It's the second time that they've had the Lindajo, Sanchez, Cordero, Jean Martin, Hernandez axis. Do you think you can name the first time?
I wonder if it was against the Chiefs, because it's probably the other best performance I've put in.
It was against the Chiefs, exactly. I think, and again, I think it is a byproduct of the Kings, but I don't think it's all the Kings. I think when these guys get together, and you can see Sanchez, everyone just kind of revolves around Sanchez, whether it's Lindajo, Cordero just sits on his shoulder and sniffs around him the whole time. And Jean Martin does a lot of creating at that 12 row. I think you can expect some good things to come if they do get this axis in. I think Senatore probably blew up a lot of people's matchups on Sunday because he had some late points corrections that came through as well. So he was immense, sat on the wing and got 3 meat pies. I don't want to dwell too much on this game because it was, start or start all your Jaguares players. There was a couple of Kings players that went okay as well. It's the centre that's come in, but for the most part, this game was a bit of a free-for-all, 100 points. Right, let's move on to Chiefs Sharks, which is our match of the day game. Tamanivalu was pretty strong first try, 60 seconds, and after that he's a little bit quieter. I guess folks certainly from South Africa would have seen this from Garth April, seen a bit of promise from him. I guess if they're going to go this way, he's a little bit of a different type of player, isn't he, Garth April?
From Joe Peterson? Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess it's all going to be tempered with Patrick Lambie coming back sometime in the middle of May, I believe.
Yeah, I think they were saying there's a match against the Highlanders. I can't remember what round that is.
Yeah, that's right. What did you think of Aaron Cruden? You predicted it on the podcast. Aaron Cruden kicking goals?
Well, for me, it's just common sense. I think this was always going to happen at some point. Mm-hmm. And I think the whole narrative about being worried about Cruden's kicking, like he's an international rugby player, a World Cup winner. If he goes through a bit of a form slump, he'll go and work on it and it'll come back. And it was always likely to happen. I think if you looked at it completely in isolation and just said, is Damien McKenzie a better goal kicker than Aaron Cruden? No, maybe marginally, but not significantly. Neither of them are probably what you'd class as, amazing kickers. They're about at the same level. And I think that eventually this was always going to happen, and, trying to predict it is a bit of a fool's errand, I think. But I just think that the whole, like I said, the narrative about Cruden's kicking was, like he's kind of gone off the boil, or that he somehow had the yips and it was never going to come back. I think it was just nonsense, really. Yeah, look, I don't buy into that.
I personally have always been a little bit worried with Cruden in the way he strikes the ball anyway, out of hand and off the boot, which is why I've always been a little bit critical of him. But from fantasy rugby, it doesn't matter. He's still going to collect those points, and he's not the type of player that... this game he actually did kick fairly well. Still, he thuds a lot of balls, but he got some good stats, and that's what, at the end of the day, that's how you do it. You remember old Waisali Karibi, way back in the day. He's just, just get it over the bar. That's all you need to do. And he did that again. I think for the Chiefs, though, it's just playing the Sharks, they're a good team, and especially away from the home. They did a little bit of what the Lions did last year, right? When they came on tour, they were just like, well, let's just defend. Let's just concentrate on defending, and we'll express ourselves when we can. Now, I will say, with Garth April, with his upside, obviously, with his, he sets better backline, and he also has a little bit of more of an enterprising kind of young, confident, I can do anything type play to him, but on defence, he is seriously lacking. The Chiefs targeted the channel a number of times, and he was found wanting a couple of times, and I think that'll certainly get targeted in the upcoming weekend against the Hurricanes. All right, anything more from this match that you wanted to chat about?
Not specifically from this match, but obviously James Lowe missed out. But I did see on his Twitter feed that he was saying that the shoulder injury that he had was minor, and he's expecting to play this weekend against the Highlanders.
Okay, all right, that's good news. Okay, let's jump into. I'm very conscious of time, so we're going to whip through very quickly some free agents. Osman, have a think about who you might recommend for this week. But I'm looking at players that are playing in the Blues against the Kings. I'm also looking in the Force Sunwolves match. So in the Blues, I'm thinking of players like Luatua. Tuipulotu, I know, has been dropped in a few leagues. Malani Nanai might be floating around. He potentially could come in for Rico Ioane. We don't really know yet. And then looking at the Force, there's a midfielder that's playing out of position, Marcel Breakey. He's on the wing for the Force. I suspect that will continue. And then looking at the Sunwolves or the Moondogs, players like Sasakura is probably going to come in for Lolahia, who got injured last week. Paia is another winger who's listed as a midfielder. And then your normal players like Carpenter and Tatakawa. Obviously PC's in there as well. So just looking at those three teams in particular, in terms of potentially looking at your free agency. Any particular ones from you, mate?
No, I think you're right about Milani Nanai. I think he's got to be in with a good shout now.
It's interesting that Duffy came on though, right? Duffy was made the bench and he came on. It was actually an interesting article. Justin, friend of the podcast, Justin Pivers sent it through to me this afternoon saying that Tana or someone who was writing the article said it was a great debut. We even got a chance to debut Matt Duffy this weekend. So, I'm not sure how you could forget that bump off of Nadolo, but hey, they have.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, and I guess maybe Pierce Francis is somebody that will be on probably nobody's team, but maybe he should be.
Yeah, and in the spirit of playing the Kings, even though that he did take a kick at this point, but yeah, you're right. We haven't heard any injuries of any news from Ehire, but even if he does start, there's some value there, I think. All right, let's jump into the top scores, managers and leagues. So the top manager this week was with the top score of 234.1 was Shaggy's 15, Craig Hall. Well done, sir.
Good work.
And the top, good name, great name. I think he actually might be he was playing in the Rugby Forum League. Those chaps are having a whale of a time over there.
Do you think, if someone was to ask him, did you get the top score this week, he'd say it wasn't me? Sorry, that's awful.
Good. That's good. Moving on to the top managers overall. So number 5 was Waratahs. Number 4, Luke Crombie. Number 3, Andre Heineke. Number 2, Ori Sharan. And number 1 overall manager is Sam Konoski. Well done, Sam. Top work. And the top leagues, not a hell of a lot of change at the top. The number 5 league, the Shiza Bowl, not to be confused with the Shiva or the Shiza or a different spelling, but this has got bowl with 2 L's. Dave's Dickheads, number 4. Chip and Chase, number 3. The Highvale Bowl, number 2, which makes the B&B League number 1 again. Well done, lads. Congratulations. Anything more from this week, mate, before you have to duck off and get your spray tan? What number spray tan are you getting? Are you getting number 3? Are you getting Puerto Rican? What are you getting?
Oh, I think it's always good to just leave a little bit of intrigue. And plus, you seem to have a pretty good handle on my diary. It doesn't matter whether I'm here or not here. You seem to know exactly where I am and quite happy to broadcast that out. So that's good. That's good. It's good. I don't have to think about these things. You've got under control.
Well, we're getting into winter, right? There's not a hell of a lot of sun on the skin. You want to get those levels up.
I'll take your word for that.
A little bit of admin. You can follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Rug Draft. That's Fantasy RUG Draft. Or drop us a mail, support@fantasyrugbydraft.com. As we said, there's a lot of trade questions coming through that are behind closed doors, so absolutely please send them through on emails. That's about all the time we have for today. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson. He's Nathan Mossman.
Can you actually just say the name of that Fijian Sevens player again, please?
El Tiorpedo.
What a bust here by Christian Cullen. Plenty of support and what a dummy.